I don't know exactly why I picked that particular spot to camp. Maybe it was the way the trees curved overhead like an archway, or how the dirt road that led to it was so overgrown it didn't even seem like a road anymore. It was just me, my backpack, a small tent, and everything I thought I needed to spend 4 nights out in the forest alone. I had driven 4 hours to get there, and by the time I parked my car off the shoulder of a narrow dirt path, the sun had already started to drop behind the trees. I didn't want to waste time. I hiked in about 20 minutes from the car, not even on a proper trail, just weaving through the brush and trying to keep track of landmarks. The trees were tall and thick, and the deeper I walked in, the quieter everything got. I picked a flat clearing not far from a thin stream and set up camp. There was no one around for miles. That was the whole point. I unpacked, made a fire, cooked some noodles from a packet, and sat back against a log. The first night was quiet, almost peaceful. It got cold fast, and I had to keep the fire going longer than I thought I would. The stars were bright above me, and the only sounds were crickets and the occasional owl in the distance. I went to sleep a little uneasy, but not scared, just alert. I always get that way the first night camping alone. The second day I hiked around the area. I didn't want to go too far from my site because I didn't mark it with anything and there were no real trails to follow back. I spent hours just walking along the stream, exploring the thick woods. At one point, I came across what looked like an old tree stand nailed high into a pine tree. The wood was rotting and broken in half. I stood there looking at it for a while. It was weird because it didn't look like it had been used in years, but I thought about who might have built it, how often they used it, and if they still came out here. I kept walking, but I kept thinking about it. When I got back to my site that evening, something felt off. Nothing was out of place exactly. My gear was still there, the tent was closed, and the fire pit was untouched. But I got that tight feeling in my stomach, like someone had been there or was watching me. I brushed it off and told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe because of the tree stand or the quiet of the place. I didn't want to pack up and leave just because of a weird feeling. So I stayed. That night, I barely slept. I thought I heard footsteps outside the tent. It was past midnight. I'd been laying there for hours just listening to the wind in the trees and my own heartbeat. And then I heard it. Crunching leaves, slow and careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I held my breath. My tent walls were thin, and I had no weapon. Just a camping knife. The steps stopped right behind my tent. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My mind was racing. Then nothing. Just silence. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually the sun came up and I got out of the tent. There were no tracks. The leaves were disturbed a little, but nothing clear. I walked around in a circle, maybe 50 feet in every direction, looking for signs. Nothing. I didn't want to believe someone had been out there in the middle of the night, but deep down I knew I didn't imagine it. That third day I kept close to camp. I didn't want to get caught far away if something happened. I collected wood, kept the fire going, and double-checked everything I had packed. I kept thinking about those footsteps. Who would be out here? I hadn't seen a soul since I parked my car, and even then, that road was practically invisible. It felt like I had stepped into a part of the forest that time had forgotten. At dusk, I set up a few makeshift noise traps around my tent. Just small things, tin cans from my food strung together, placed near the edges of the clearing. I didn't know if they'd work, but it made me feel a little better. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat up with my flashlight and my knife in hand, waiting. Around 2 a.m., one of the cans clinked. I froze. It was faint, just one sound, but it was enough. I aimed the flashlight toward the noise, but I couldn't see anything. The trees were too thick. I held my breath again, listening. A second clink, then silence. I wanted to get up and check, but I couldn't make myself move. I just sat there, staring into the dark, gripping the knife so hard my hand cramped. Eventually the fire died and the cold crept in, but I didn't dare close my eyes. The sun finally rose. I checked the traps. One of the cans had been kicked a few feet. There was a small shoe print in the dirt beside it. Not a boot, not a hiking shoe. It looked like a worn sneaker. It was definitely not mine. That was it. I decided to leave. I packed everything fast and didn't even eat breakfast. I kept looking over my shoulder. The woods didn't feel quiet anymore. They felt tense, like the trees were holding their breath. I started hiking back toward where I'd parked the car. I didn't take the same route. I was trying to be quick, and that's when I made a mistake. I got lost. The more I walked, the more everything started to look the same. The stream I thought I was following curved the wrong way. The sun was high, but I couldn't get my bearings. I tried to backtrack and ended up deeper in. The forest got denser. I found myself in a patch where the trees were so thick the ground barely had any undergrowth. Everything was dark green and quiet, but not peaceful, just dead. I stopped to catch my breath and heard something again. Twigs snapping. This time they weren't close, but they were steady, like someone walking at a distance, following. I couldn't see anyone, but the sound came and went. Always a few steps, then silence, then again. I started to move faster, pushing through branches, stumbling over roots. I scratched my arms and legs, tore my pants on something sharp. I just kept going. I stopped once more, completely out of breath, and when I turned around, I saw something I can't forget. Far back, maybe 50 yards through the trees, there was someone standing. Not moving, just standing behind a tree, half hidden. I didn't shout. I didn't speak. I turned and ran. I ran for what felt like forever. My pack bounced hard against my back. I dropped my water bottle. My legs felt like rubber. I didn't stop until I saw the road. It wasn't the road I came in on, but it was a road. Gravel and dirt, wide enough for one car. I followed it, hoping it would lead me somewhere. After maybe 15 minutes of walking, I heard a car coming and jumped out into the middle of the path, waving my arms. An old man in a beat-up pickup stopped. I told him I was lost, and he gave me a ride back to where I'd left my car. He didn't say much, just nodded and pointed when we got there. My car was untouched. I thanked him, got in, locked the doors, and didn't breathe until I hit pavement again. When I got home, I checked the area I had camped on Google Earth. There were no marked trails, no hunting cabins, no ranger stations, just forest. I don't know who that person was. I don't know how they found me or why they didn't do anything. Maybe they were just watching. Maybe they had a reason, but I'll never go back there again. I still have that shoe print burned into my memory. I still hear the cans clink sometimes when I try to sleep. I don't camp alone anymore, and I always keep a weapon now. Not because of bears, not because of wolves, because of people. Because sometimes, being alone out there isn't really being alone at all. I had always enjoyed camping, especially when I needed to clear my mind. I liked the silence, the simplicity, and the way everything slowed down when I left the city behind. That weekend, I decided to head to a remote spot I had never been to before, somewhere I found on an old hiking forum. It was about a 5-hour drive from where I lived, deep in the northern woods, far from any towns or cell signal. The post said the place was perfect for solitude, rarely visited, and had a stream nearby for water. That was all I needed to hear. I packed light but thorough. Tent, sleeping bag, some freeze-dried food, cooking gear, water filter, flashlight, headlamp, batteries, bear spray, and a small hatchet. I also brought a journal and a paperback novel, thinking I'd have time to relax by the fire. I left early Saturday morning and arrived at the trailhead just before noon. There were no other cars parked there, which I took as a good sign. The trail was overgrown but still visible, like it hadn't been used in a long time. I strapped on my backpack and started walking. The trail was narrow and rugged, with roots and rocks everywhere. It wound through thick pine forest, then up a short ridge where I had a view of the valley below. I followed the path for nearly 2 hours before I came across the spot described in the forum. There was a small clearing surrounded by trees, with a sloping hill on one side and a shallow stream about 50 feet away. I looked around for animal tracks or any signs that the area was frequently used, but it seemed untouched. That made me feel even better about the place. I set up my tent near the base of the hill, not too close to the stream in case of rain. The ground was soft and mostly flat. I gathered firewood from the surrounding woods, enough to last me through the night. By the time I had everything set up and a small fire going, the sun was already starting to dip behind the trees. The forest around me went quiet, the way it does when night creeps in. I cooked a simple meal, ate, then sat by the fire for a while, listening to the sounds of the woods, branches creaking in the wind, the distant rush of water from the stream, the occasional chirp of a bird. It was peaceful, and for a moment I forgot about everything else. As the fire burned down, I crawled into my tent and zipped myself into my sleeping bag. I left the rain fly off so I could see the stars through the mesh top. It was a clear night, and the sky looked endless. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound. At first, I thought it was just an animal moving through the woods, maybe a deer or a raccoon. I stayed still, listening. The sound was soft but steady, footsteps, not the fast, darting kind animals make. These were slow and deliberate. I held my breath. The footsteps came closer, then stopped. I heard the soft crunch of dead leaves, just a few feet from my tent. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever, or whatever, it was might hear it. I reached for the small hatchet I kept beside me inside the tent. I didn't unzip anything. I just laid there, frozen, listening. The footsteps moved again, this time circling the tent slowly, like someone was inspecting it. I didn't move an inch. After what felt like forever, the sound faded into the woods. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At first light, I got out of the tent and looked around. I found footprints in the soft ground. They were human. They came from the trees, circled the tent once, and went back the way they came. No boot tread, just flat sole prints. I followed them for about 10 feet before they disappeared into the forest. My stomach turned. Someone had been out there in the middle of the night watching me. I considered packing up and leaving right then, but part of me didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe it was another camper who got lost or stumbled onto my site. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I decided to stay, but I made sure to keep the fire going all day. I wanted to look occupied, alert. I also gathered a lot more wood in case I needed to stay up through the night. The second day passed uneventfully. I didn't see or hear anyone. I filtered water, read my book, wrote in my journal, and tried to act like I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. But by evening, the sense of unease returned. I cooked my dinner and ate quickly, then sat by the fire again. I kept the hatchet close and wore my headlamp around my neck. That night, I didn't get into the sleeping bag. I sat inside the tent with the door unzipped, facing out, the firelight flickering beyond the mesh. I must have nodded off at some point, because I woke with a jolt to the sound of twigs snapping. It was past midnight, and the fire was almost out. I saw nothing at first, but then my eyes adjusted. Across the clearing, near the tree line, I saw movement. A person was standing there, not walking, not saying anything, just standing, watching. I turned on my headlamp and aimed it toward the figure. They ducked behind a tree. I couldn't tell what they looked like, but I knew it was a man, tall, not carrying anything I could see. I yelled out, just noise to scare him off, but he didn't run. He just stepped back out, staring. Then he turned and walked into the woods again. I waited until dawn to move. As soon as the sun came up, I packed my gear as fast as I could. I barely ate anything. The trail back felt longer than it did the first time. Every crack of a branch made me spin around. I was sure he was out there, somewhere in the woods, maybe watching me leave. I kept my hatchet in my hand the entire time. When I got to the trailhead, my car was untouched. I drove for miles before I stopped at a gas station. I sat in the car for a long time, just breathing. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? Some man was watching me? No crime had been committed, but I knew I'd never go back to that place again. Weeks passed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I checked that hiking forum again and noticed something strange. The post about the campsite was gone, deleted. The account that posted it no longer existed. I dug through the cached pages and eventually found a comment thread where others mentioned similar experiences. Strange sounds, feeling watched, even seeing someone in the woods. One person said they reported it years ago, but nothing ever came of it. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. That part of the forest had a pattern. Someone was out there, maybe not living out there, but returning often. Maybe using the forum to lure people to that specific spot. I had walked right into it. After that, I bought a trail cam and set it up on some nearby land I had access to. Not that spot, but a private property area where I could test it. I left it up for a week. When I went back to check the footage, I saw normal stuff: deer, raccoons, a fox. Then one night, around 2 a.m., a man walked into frame. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was just standing near the tree line, staring toward where I had set up a dummy tent. Then he walked off. That land was posted. No one had permission to be there. I took the footage to the sheriff's office. They asked some questions, made a report. Nothing came of it. They didn't know who he was. They didn't seem that interested. I stopped camping after that. I sold most of my gear. I still hike sometimes, but only on well-traveled trails and never alone. I still don't know who that man was, or how many others he's done that to. But I know what I felt out there wasn't in my head. I wasn't imagining it. Something was wrong in those woods. And the scariest part was that nothing about it was supernatural. It was just a person choosing to be out there, watching, waiting. And people like that don't need to do anything to hurt you. They just need to make you feel unsafe enough that you never come back. For me, that was enough. It was late October when I decided to go on a solo camping trip. I had been working too much, barely sleeping, and needed a break from everything. My job involved staring at a screen for hours, and my mind was constantly buzzing. I wanted silence, space, and time to reset. So I picked a remote camping spot deep inside a national forest about 5 hours from my home. It wasn't a big, popular site. It was one of those lesser-known places with no marked trails, no campsites, and barely any signs of other people. Just raw wilderness. The drive there was long, mostly highway, then narrow back roads, and finally dirt tracks full of potholes. I had to go slow once I got off the main road, and the forest around me got thicker with every mile. Tall trees lined both sides of the path, and the sunlight barely touched the ground. By the time I reached the spot I had pinned on my GPS, it was early afternoon. The place was exactly what I wanted. Isolated, quiet, and beautiful in a raw, untouched kind of way. The air felt cleaner than anywhere else I'd been. All I could hear were birds, the wind, and leaves rustling. I set up my tent near a small creek. It was a good spot because I had water nearby, and the ground was mostly flat. I spent the rest of the afternoon collecting firewood, unpacking my gear, and setting up a small area to cook. I had brought a simple one-burner stove, canned food, some instant noodles, and a lot of snacks. I wasn't planning on hiking too far. This trip was all about staying still. That first night was peaceful. I sat by the fire and listened to the sounds of the forest. I could hear distant howls that were probably coyotes, maybe wolves, but I wasn't too worried. I kept my food locked away in a bear canister and didn't leave anything around. I was careful. When it got too cold, I crawled into my sleeping bag and fell asleep to the sound of the creek nearby. I woke up once in the middle of the night. I don't know why. Maybe it was a noise or just the cold. But I remember lying there and feeling strange. Not scared, just alert. I listened, but everything seemed normal. The usual forest sounds. I drifted off again. The next day, I spent my time walking around the area. I didn't follow a trail, just wandered. I found a small hill that gave me a better view of the forest. From up there, I couldn't see any signs of other people. No smoke, no tents, no paths. It really was just me out there. When I got back to camp in the late afternoon, I noticed something small that bothered me. A stick near my tent had moved. I had set it up as a marker earlier to measure how far the creek might rise if it rained. It was a few feet from where I had left it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it didn't roll there on its own. It was too heavy and thick. I stood there for a while, staring at it, and then checked around the tent. Nothing else looked touched. I convinced myself maybe an animal had bumped it or stepped on it. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing twigs snapping. Not the usual rustling or animal sounds, but short, sharp breaks, like someone stepping carefully on dry branches. I unzipped my tent and looked out. It was pitch black except for the faint glow of the moon. I didn't see anything. I stayed up for a while, sitting in my sleeping bag and listening. After an hour or two, I finally fell asleep out of exhaustion. The third day is when everything started feeling off. I went for another short walk, but something felt different. I couldn't explain it. The forest felt quieter, too quiet. Even the birds seemed gone. I didn't hear the usual chirping or rustling, just wind. When I got back to my camp, I saw that my food canister had been moved. It was about 10 feet from where I had hidden it under some branches. The lid was still on, but there were smudges on the outside, like dirty handprints. I stood there staring at it for a long time. I hadn't seen a single person since I got here. Who would come out all the way here just to mess with my stuff? It didn't make sense. I checked around again but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat by the fire with my flashlight and a small camping axe. I wasn't going to take any chances. Around midnight, I thought I saw movement just beyond the trees. A shadow. I shined my flashlight in that direction, but there was nothing. The beam of light only lit up part of the tree trunks. Everything else stayed black. I stayed up until the fire burned low. Then I got into the tent, zipped it shut, and tried to stay as quiet as I could. I lay there wide awake, listening to every sound. Sometime near dawn, I heard it. Slow, careful steps outside. Not animal sounds. These were footsteps. 2 feet. Human. I held my breath and didn't move. The steps stopped right outside my tent. I could hear breathing, slow and heavy. My heart was pounding so hard I felt sick. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a weapon, just that small axe. I stayed frozen. Then the breathing stopped. Silence. I waited for what felt like forever. I didn't hear the steps move away. I didn't hear anything. Eventually, I must have passed out from stress because I don't remember anything else until I woke up with the sun. When I got out of the tent, I checked around. No one was there, of course, but I found something that confirmed what I feared. Footprints, bare feet, pair of them, not animal tracks. They circled my tent. I followed them for a while until they disappeared into the woods. The prints looked fresh. I decided I was leaving. I didn't care that I had planned to stay another day. I packed everything up as fast as I could, stuffed my gear into the backpack, and got moving. But the worst part was still coming. About an hour into the hike back to my truck, I realized I was going the wrong way. I had marked my path with small pieces of orange tape tied to branches, but I didn't see them. Somehow I had gotten turned around. I checked my GPS, but it wouldn't load. Just spinning and freezing. No signal, no direction. I tried to stay calm. I sat down, drank some water, and looked around. Everything looked the same. Trees, rocks, fallen logs. I knew panicking would only make things worse. I decided to backtrack to the last point I was sure of. I started walking again, slowly checking every tree. After maybe 30 minutes, I finally found one of my orange markers. That's when I saw it. The tape had been torn down. Someone had pulled it off and tied it lower to the trunk, almost hidden behind a rock. I knew exactly how high I had tied it when I came through. Someone had changed it. That's when I knew for sure I wasn't alone. Someone had been watching me, following me, and messing with my path. My whole body went cold. I didn't know who it was or what they wanted, but it was clear they didn't want me to leave, or they wanted me to get lost. I started moving faster. I ignored the markers and just tried to go in one direction, hoping to hit the dirt road eventually. I figured if I kept moving east, I'd make it back. I walked for hours. My legs hurt, and my shoulders were sore from the pack. I didn't stop to eat. I just drank water and kept going. Every once in a while, I thought I heard something behind me, like someone matching my pace. When I stopped, the sound stopped too. But when I started again, I'd hear it faintly. Leaves crunching. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see anything. I just focused on walking. Eventually, after what felt like forever, I broke through the tree line and hit the dirt road. I almost cried when I saw it. My truck was still parked where I had left it. No one around. I ran to it, jumped in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The drive back was a blur. I kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. I didn't relax until I was back on the highway. I didn't report anything. I didn't know what to say. No one had actually hurt me. Nothing had been stolen. But I knew someone had been there. Someone had followed me, watched me sleep, touched my things, and tried to mess with my route back. I never went camping alone again. Not after that. I still go out into nature, but only with friends now. And never to places that remote. I love the silence of the woods, but that trip changed how I feel about being truly alone. Because out there, far from everything, if something goes wrong, no one will hear you. And sometimes, someone might be out there just waiting for you to be alone.